Now that we've gotten our HTML upfitted and ready for some CSS, it's actually time for us to apply some styles to our template so that it looks a little bit better than it does now. Now again, for our purposes, we want to be working on all of these files as part of a project. So if you're opening individual files in your code editor, which is probably Sublime Text unless you have some background in this and have chosen a different code editor. So you want to make sure that you know how to open this where you can navigate through a whole project instead of file by file, because that also starts to get your file management just a little bit out of hand. So what you want to do is take that GRD 188 folder and we want to drag it and drop it onto the icon in the dock if you're using a Mac for our project here. Now if you're using a PC, what you might have to do instead is go to project, and you can either go to open project if you've already created one, or you can go to file and open will allow you to navigate to the folder and you can choose to open from there. And that's going to work on both a Mac and a PC. But what you really want is this left-hand sidebar that shows you all of the files within your GRD 188 folder so that you can move between them and open more than one. There's a few folders we might not need to open. Any of our projects that we've done are exercises to learn. You know, the tutorials, the crash courses, we're not going to need to open. We don't need to open our backup here yet. So far we're in pretty good shape. We're not going to create a backup for this phase because this is part 2 of the CSS project. So we're going to continue working on our topmost files in our GRD 188 folder. But we are going to spend a fair amount of time working within this styles.css file. Now you want to make sure you're putting all of your custom CSS in here. We don't want, even though we have access to all.min.css, we don't want to add anything to it and we don't want to change anything in it. We want to make sure that all of our custom styles are going in styles.css, and that's going to allow us to keep everything separate, but plus that way when Font Awesome upgrades to a new version, we can just download and drop that new style sheet in here without overwriting any of the changes that we made, because all of our changes are safely stored in styles.css. So what I'm going to do though is I'm going to actually go ahead and create in my view menu a 2-column layout by going to the layout menu and choosing columns 2. And I'm going to pull my style sheet over to the second column. And then I'm going to put my cursor in the first column and I'm going to open up. I'm actually going to work from styleguide.html for this because it has more code in it. It has more stuff taking place on the page. And if I look at that in the browser, you can see what I mean. Right now, Style Guide has all of these different pieces of typography. That's going to be helpful for me once I start styling it. But I need to apply all these changes to the template as I go as well, or as I'm done. So what we're going to be trying to achieve today is to use a wireframe to design our website. So what we want to achieve today is a website that looks something like this drawing right here. So this is a desktop wireframe, and previously we had a sitemap, if you remember. Let me see. I'm going to open up that diagram as well just so we can compare them. So the last time we were looking at diagrams, we were looking at this sitemap, and this sitemap just lets us know what pages need to be available on the website. It essentially gives us our navigation, and the key lets us know what we're building versus what someone else is building. Now again, if we were a web designer, we would be creating this diagram. So I've provided it to you for now just for consistency and to give you some initial exposure to it before asking you to do one on your own. But you would normally create the sitemap as well as several wireframes as part of your negotiation of the scope of work. And this would allow both you and your client some sort of tangible document to be able to have conversations about the website so that everyone was clear on what you were going to build and how much it was going to cost and how much time it would take. And so we use these to make sure that we're all on the same page with that. So a wireframe is a little bit different from a sitemap. So a sitemap shows the pages that are going to be here and how they're going to be connected to each other. And what a wireframe does is it shows the layout of the page. Now, if you were drawing one of these and you were using a software like Glyphy, which is the one that I'm using here, you'd want to make sure that you avoided the impulse to add any kind of aesthetics to this. You don't want to use custom typefaces or colors or anything like that. You want to mostly keep it just very, very basic. That's why it's called a wireframe. It's sort of like a skeleton. And all it does is it shows the basic layout of the page. Now in this case, this wireframe is speaking to what we would call the theme of the website or the skin of the website. So this is kind of similar to when we are talking about parent pages in InDesign. And what we use our theme for, or what our theme is made up of, are all of the elements that need to be in the same place on every page. And so in this case, our theme elements are really going to be our navigation bar at the top, our navigation bar at the bottom, and the main content container in the middle here. What's going to change is the content that's in here. And so we need to keep all of that code consistent on every single page in order to have a consistent theme or skin. So when we're looking at this on the website, and we take a look at the template page, right now we have all of that there, right? And then if I open up the style guide page, if I click back and forth, especially with the header here between these two pages, you see how the navigation bar doesn't move. What changes is the stuff in the main element. And if I were to scroll down far enough on the style guide page, it's harder to see here because of the amount of content pushing it down. But this lower navigation bar, the secondary navigation bar, is also the same. So if we look at that in code view, what that means, if I were to come over here, let me come back to my column 1 here, and let me open the style guide in addition to, let's try it here. Okay, so now I have my template and my style guide, but if I move these into the same tab, again, if you pay attention to the code that's taking place here, you can see how these are. Oh, I see the description's a lot longer. Let me expand this out real quick. We can see that other than that description and that title, this code is the same. And it's actually going to be the same all the way to the end of the header here. So if I move that to where those are kind of in the same spot, roughly, you can see that the header is really the same for each one of these. You see how there's very little movement there, but it's right after the main element opens that things start to change. And then the same thing takes place down here at the footer. So if I get to the point where the footer is aligned on both of these, and I click back and forth, we're not going to see any change. You see how they are exactly the same. And that's really important because we need to make sure that we have a consistent theme on our website. So as we make changes to anything above the opening main tag on our pages, we need to make sure that all pages are updated like that. And then every time we make a change to anything below where the main element closes, we need to make sure that all pages get those changes. For now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the style guide and I'm going to get it completely finished. And then I'm going to copy the code from the main element opening up and from the main element closing down into my template so that they're similar. So hopefully that makes sense. If not, make sure to watch this again or get some clarification so that you understand. But really the whole goal is just to make sure that when we're making our website, that website on every page has the navigation bar at the top in the same place and at the bottom in the same place, and that the main element, the container of the main element, is consistent. So that's what we're going to be doing throughout. And also remember that with a wireframe, we want to avoid any kind of colors or typefaces, anything that would be an aesthetic element. And the reason for that is that what we need our client to sign off on here is not aesthetics. We need them to sign off on layout. We need them to agree that this is going to be where the navigation bar is going to go, and that these are going to be the links that are there, and this is how they're going to be worded, and that we're going to have a footer that has these links, and that this is how they're going to be worded. And so once your client signs off on this, then we can start talking about aesthetics. But if we make this look pretty to us, when we present it to the client, if they have different tastes than us, they're going to focus more on the aesthetic than the layout. So for example, if we use yellow and our client doesn't like yellow, they're going to fixate on that yellow being there, and they're going to have a really hard time just talking about the layout and not talking about aesthetics if we present any kind of hint of aesthetics. So we always keep our wireframes very stripped down, and we make sure to avoid any kind of suggestion of aesthetic elements so that our client can focus on what's most important with the wireframe, which is the layout.